Welcome to the Age is Irrelevant podcast with your host, Helen Fritsch. Helen is a 60-plus lifelong competitive athlete, flight attendant, published fitness model, writer, IFBB bodybuilding pro, and certified wine specialist who believes that your age is irrelevant to pursue goals, dreams, and desires. Are you a woman in her 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond who still has a burning desire to pursue a dream or a passion? Are you thinking about starting a new chapter in your life, but you're hesitant, thinking that you might be too old or just don't know where to begin? The Age is Irrelevant podcast is a podcast devoted to women who want to defy the odds, smash barriers, and redefine happiness and success after 40. It's time to make a difference. There is no need to dread blowing out that added birthday candle every year. A new movement is slowly taking momentum, where being over the hill just isn't relevant anymore. Age labels are being thrown out the window, and women are rediscovering the strength within themselves to make a difference, not only within their own lives, but also touching and inspiring the lives of other women. Join Helen as she and her guests discuss all aspects of aging after 40 and how to make the aging process and those twilight years more rewarding, exciting, and fun.
Hello, and welcome to the Age is Irrelevant podcast. I'm your host, Helen Fritsch, and this is episode number 69. Well, it's been a minute since I've done a podcast, well over a month, and I sincerely apologize for that. But unfortunately, I succumbed to COVID like everyone else that I know, and COVID turned into pneumonia. So I was actually pretty sick for almost a month, and I lost my voice most of the time. So even if I was feeling better, my voice was nowhere near it should be to do a podcast. But I'm back now, and I'm super excited to bring you my guest today, 81-year-old Vicky Durand. I found Vicky on an interview and knew right off the bat that I had to have her on the show. She is the author of a book called Wave Woman, The Life and Struggles of a Surfing Pioneer. And she's paying homage to her mom, Betty, who became a surfing pioneer back in the 1950s. And like mother, like daughter, Vicky followed her in that surfing path. And to hear their stories about surfing and the entire experience, her mom being so strong, such a jack of all trades, both these women just renegades, rebels, pioneers in their time, rebranding and redefining the terms, age is irrelevant. Back then in the 1950s, I just knew that after reading this article about Vicky and her mom that I had to have her on the show because so many of us can relate to that right now. We're all going through changes and we're stepping outside of the box and we're taking that leap of faith and we're trying new things. And if this interview doesn't motivate you and inspire you to continue down that path, I don't know what will. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview with Vicky, and here we go. Hi, Vicky. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Helen. So great to be here. Thank you for your interest.
Oh, I'm so interested and so excited. And we were just speaking earlier about how I so resonate with you and your mom. And as soon as I saw your story, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to have you on my podcast. So I was so thrilled that you were able to join me on my podcast. But for my listeners, I am talking to 81-year-old Vicky Durand. Now, Vicky is an author. She just came out with a book and basically an homage to her mom. But she's an author, surfer, educator, fashion designer, passionate animal lover. And, the list goes on. Between you and your mom, I was just overwhelmed by all the different journeys that you both have taken, and especially hearing about your mom, especially when she got older and she started losing her eyesight, and then she started, writing haiku. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she was just like nonstop. And she's just recently passed. She was 98, 99.
98 and a half. She wanted to make it to her 99th year because she figured then she would have been on Earth 100 years.
Right. Right.
but
Yeah.
she didn't make it. But
Oh.
when one door closed for her, she always opened another. And I'm trying to do the same thing, follow her footsteps. I don't in any way measure up, but I keep trying.
Well, and Vicky has written a book called Wave Woman: The Life and Struggles of a Surfing Pioneer, and it's directly in homage to her mom, Betty. But before we get into that, I always like to ask my guests about their upbringing, and your upbringing is actually very fascinating because it has to all do about you and your mom and surfing. So let's just start about where you were born, and then how everything took you over to Hawaii.
Yes, yes. Well, I was actually born in Los Angeles when my parents lived in Palos Verdes, and we lived there until I was about one and something. And when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the Southern California became very they couldn't go to the beach. They couldn't have any lights on at night. They couldn't drive. So they moved inland to a place called Northern Chino. So that's where I lived until I was 12, when my aunt and uncle from Molokai came to visit. And we bonded, and they said, "Oh, you have to come to Hawaii and spend the summer with us. But you have to be 12," because my uncle was the superintendent of the leper colony at Kalapapa on Molokai. So 12 came, and my mother put me on the plane for Honolulu. It was over a 10-hour flight. And I spent the summer with Uncle Smithy and Aunt Jane and fell in love with Hawaii. When I got home, back to Chino, which we had a lovely life. I had a horse, we had a swimming pool, but it wasn't Hawaii. So I just moped and cried around, and mother said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I miss Hawaii and I want to live there." So she came over to visit the following year, which was 1955. She also fell in love with Hawaii, but she was 41 then, and that's when she took up surfing. So she not only fell in love with Hawaii, she fell in love with surfing, and we were able to spend a summer here. And at the end, she said, "You girls want to move to Hawaii?" And we said, "Oh, yes." So she said, "Okay." This was August. She said, "We'll be on the plane the day after Christmas." So the day after Christmas of 1955 came, and no, it was 54. And we were on the plane, and that started a whole new life journey for us. And we lived in Waikiki, actually in a guest house that belonged to the Dad Center Apartments. And Dad Center was the father of modern canoeing, Duke Kahanamoku's coach, an amazing man. And so every day we got to spend some time with him, listening to his stories. And he coached us. He loaned mother her first surfboard, which I talk about in the book, which was very long and without a skeg and very heavy. And it wasn't long that she said, "I have to get my own board. So that was the beginning. I was in high school. My sister was in grade school. And then mother and I started surfing together at Waikiki. So that was an amazing time. So after surfing at Waikiki, in between waves, you get to know the regulars. And then at that time, there were really only about 2,000 surfers in all of Hawaii, according to Ben Finney, who wrote his master's thesis. And there were waves for everybody, and it was just really glorious. But she met a Chinese Hawaiian man who had just built a house out at Makaha Beach, which is out on the west side, about 36 miles. And his name was Jimmy Wong. And he said, "Betty, you have to come to Makaha and see my house, see the surf, see Makaha." So one Sunday morning, we went out there and saw his beautiful Lindell Cedar home. And then he said, Betty, I want to show you something. And he took her next door, and there was a beach lot with a for sale sign on it. It was 13,000 square feet for $13,000. And she had been born in Salt Lake and lived in Salt Lake until she was finished high school. But she fell in love with the ocean at age 5 when her grandparents took her to Santa Monica. And then Dad Center's wife told her, if you ever see a fee simple piece of property on the beach and you can buy it, buy it. So she went up to the sign. She turned around. Makaha has a gorgeous valley where the ancient Hawaiians lived and farmed. A beautiful mountains behind. Makaha is a crescent bay that is gorgeous, turquoise water, white sand, beautiful waves. And she said, this has to be mine. And she walked up to the sign and pulled it out and put it over her shoulder. And I have a picture of that. And so that started on Monday. Actually, my father followed 6 months later, but he never really was happy in Hawaii. So, but they bought this lot. And for the next couple of years, we would go out every chance we could get. We lived, breathed, and talked surfing. We camped on the property because there was only a small refrigerator house from the war, which we kept our surfboards and our belongings in. And we slept out under the stars, and friends came out, and we made big bonfires. And it was just a really glorious time in Hawaii and a time in surfing. And my mother in 1957 said, Vicky, you might want to keep notes on this sport because I think it's going to be really, really big. She was very intuitive. And I said, Mother, I'm too busy living this sport. Why don't you take the notes? And to make a long story short, neither one of us kept the notes. And then about 6 years after she passed, I just felt that her story needed to be shared with the world because she had only been surfing for a couple of years. Makaha was also, I might add, the home of the first big international surfing contest. They hadn't hardly discovered the North Shore. Makaha was it. So they had a yearly contest. And in 1956, after only surfing for a couple of years, she entered the contest and she won the paddling and took second in the surfing event. So that made her eligible for the first Hawaiian surfing team to go to Lima, Peru. Carlos Donier was a judge, and he had learned to surf from Duke Kahanamoku and founded the Club Waikiki in Lima. And he said the winners and the runners up have to be on a team, and we are inviting you to Lima to be our guests for over a month. They were put up at the Hotel Bolivar, went to the club every day, which I might add was just the wealthiest people in Lima that were interested in surfing. And they were treated very well, and Mother made a lot of friends, and she loved them and they loved her. And she came back and she said, you know, Vicky, if you can win 1957 surfing contest at Makaha, I think we can get invited back. So she was very competitive in everything she did. She grew up playing basketball, running track, football, ice skating, roller skating, jumping off roofs in Salt Lake into snowbanks, skiing actually, before even ski lifts, when they had to sidestep up the mountain, and then you only had time for a couple of runs by the time you got up there. And that gene skipped me. It went to my daughter, who was a very fast half miler. But I wanted to go to Lima. I'd met some of these Peruvians and I wanted to go. So I ended up winning 1957. And then when I got out of high school, the two of us traveled to Lima, and our job was to interest the women at the Club Waikiki in surfing, making it look fun, feminine, and just something they'd want to do. The men wanted their women to surf. So that was our job. And we were there for 6 weeks as their guests. And they treated us like royalty. And I was 18, and it was just an amazing time. It was one of the highlights of my life, actually. And we had an apartment together. We didn't get to stay at the Hotel Boulevard, but we had a nice apartment. And we traveled throughout Peru. And then I stayed for 3 months, but she returned to Hawaii and went back. She was one of the she believed very strongly that every woman should have a career or a profession. So she, after leaving Salt Lake, after she graduated, her father had actually bet short in the stock market. And when the crash hit, and just before 1929, they lost all their furniture in their big house up on the hill in Salt Lake next to the governor. And her parents had gone to Santa Monica and then sent the girls for the last 3 months to boarding school. So then she went down to Santa Monica, and she was in the second class of USC, out of USC, University of Southern California, in a brand new profession, dental hygiene. But before that, when she went down, she started entering the rough water swims, the competitions around the piers. And she started winning or taking second place, doing very well. And some people spotted her and said, "We want you to come up to the Uplifters Club to swim." And then she did that. And from the Uplifters, a coach spotted her and said, Coach O'Byrne, he said, "I want you to come to the Los Angeles Athletic Club, and we're going to train you for the 1936 Olympics. I think you'll be another Helen Madison, who had won 4 gold medals in the 1932. So she went to the LA Athletic Club and was training. She was out of college by now and working as a hygienist and supporting her 2 sisters who hadn't gone to college and didn't have jobs because it was the Depression. And she didn't even have enough food to eat. She said she would buy carrots and try to fill up on them. But she worked for a dentist who had an upscale Hollywood clientele. So Gloria Swanson, Bojangles, all of these Hollywood people and stuntmen were her patients. And she met some that said, "Why don't you take some flying lessons?" And she was one that believed in trying anything exciting once. So she got her, after 8 hours, I have her pilot's logbook. She got her license. And then she had been given a Studebaker by family friends that actually helped her through college because her parents had lost their money. But this couple that didn't have any children and were friends of the family gave her a Studebaker, big old Studebaker, for her graduation. And she was very popular at the flying field for towing the gliders. This is the old LA airport. So she talked them into letting her go up in one of Gus Briglip's gliders, and she crashed it from 65 feet into the ground and was taken away in the ambulance. Luckily, she lived and ended up with a compound fracture. And that, of course, ended the Olympic dreams. But she just went on. She eloped with my father after only knowing him for 2 weeks, which I don't recommend. She actually ended up leaving him during my senior year, and she moved out to Makaha. And so she was able to surf out there while she was planning her house. She built a house on the lot. So Makaha was very much that break. It's big, it's thick, it's strong, was very much like the break where she served in Lima, where she won. So when we went, we just did, there was no competition. We were just there. But when she came back after Lima, she went back to work as a dental hygienist and met one of she was so likable. Everybody just really gravitated towards her because of her personality and her philosophy, which is in the first poem that's in the book. And so she met a patient that said, Charlie Winstead is building a big 65-foot fishing boat and he's just finishing it up and you've got to meet him. So they went down to meet Charlie and she helped him on the boat because she lived to create with her hands. And they ended up eventually getting married and building. He could build anything, and together the two of them. So she had a happy life with Charlie. And when he passed, she was in her 70s and she had some friends that moved up to Oregon that had dune buggies and they rode the dunes. So she went up there, bought a red dune buggy and started riding the dunes with them on her vacation. Or she wasn't working, she was retired by then. But yeah, she just led when one door closed for her. And then finally in the end, she had lost her eyesight to macular, caught up with her slowly over about 15 years when she said, I could no longer drive my car. She had a black Cadillac. She couldn't drive that anymore. And it was really a big blow. I think that might have been the biggest blow. I can't swim in the ocean because there's a pretty good backwash, and getting in and out of the waters for younger people. I can't do this, I can't do that, but I can use my brain. So she started writing haiku. Wow. Poetry about surfing, about her life experiences, her memories, about nature. And she had actually put those together in a Xerox book with pictures, and that was her book. And that was one of my inspirations that I wanted to do a better book. And I was about a year into the book. I'm not really a writer. I was doing a lot of other things. And I just went, why didn't I ask more questions? Because, when you write, you want to know, well, how do you think she felt about what my father was doing and what her whole thing? And she never really talked about any of that. But I was out at Makaha one day in our family home in the garage, and I looked up and I saw a brown cardboard box on the shelf, and I pulled it off, and there was an autobiography that she had written at probably age 24, and there were all kinds of writings and poems and memorabilia, photos that she'd kept for 70 years. And so that helped me write the book somewhat. Getting into, and that was where she wrote that she was always felt that she'd never marry, but my father came along out of the earth, and so I'm trying to think what I haven't covered. But she living that long, she lived to 98 and a half. She would lose friends along the way, but she always found new ones. And she had a soulmate that was an emergency room doctor. She was the one that suggested, you've written so many haiku, we have to put them in a book. And on the website, I don't know if you got to that place where they had entered an essay contest, a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And they both wrote about each other. And we went to the Sheraton and saw that.
Yeah. That was awesome. And to see her speak, and just to hear her voice, and how you could tell how touched that she was. Yeah, that was very, very sweet, very, very emotional. So what did you all find so I mean, you spent so much time in the ocean, and I actually I don't know if you saw this or not, but I recently, this past week, just watched the movie or documentary movie called My Octopus Teacher,
No, I've heard.
and it won the Oscar.
Wonderful.
It is wonderful. I mean, I just mentioned that, and it just gives me chills about the completely different world underneath the water and what goes on down there. And for this one gentleman to have this relationship with an octopus, it was just amazing. But he was also just obsessed with the ocean. And so, how/why were you all both obviously obsessed with the ocean? What drew you to that?
Well, it's so magical, it's so invigorating. And surfing, I think in many ways, surfing is you can compare it to life. Well, not before I even get to that, surfing gave us a lot. You have to be strong to surf and paddle through the waves, and we
Right.
surfed before leashes. So when we fell off the board, we had to swim maybe a half mile back into shore. And I think the physical strength, I think one of the reasons that I'm where I am today is because of the physical strength. And then I'm a great believer that physical strength also can lead to mental strength for living life on a daily basis. And it's so that's one really positive thing that we didn't realize. I don't think we realized that at the time, but the ocean is just, when we were out there, you'd look back at the valley and there were rainbows, and then in the water, the fish and the clearness. And it just, like one friend said, you can feel like you're going to want to kill yourself, and you go into the water and you come out, and the ocean is so healing, and you come out totally in a good frame of mind. And my mother had a lot of struggles with my father, and I think surfing was her escape and her saviors, because when we lived in Waikiki on Royal Hawaiian Avenue all during my high school years, and surfing was her escape from her life that she had with him. And I think it gave her strength to finally just say, I don't want any more of this. I'm leaving. Bye. So,
and for someone,
and the camaraderie, like we made friends, and there's the ones that are living are still friends today. It's, and there's a whole network of people that, are friends today because of our surfing then. So there's so many things. And when you're out there, you kind of have to claim a wave. And I think that's and you have to choose carefully and quickly. And I think that's a good lesson for life. You have to claim what you want to do and do it. And Mother believed that she could do whatever she wanted to. So she, from being a dental hygienist, she said, I don't want to be bending over people's mouths anymore. I think I'll have a dental lab. So she was willing to learn what she had to learn to have another career. She learned watchmaking. She could take a watch apart and put it back together. She could look at an animal or a figure and carve it in miniature and wax and turn it into a gold charm, like the surfer. Can't see my surfer, but this
I actually can.
is what she carved and made and gave to me many years ago.
Wow.
And so, and believing that it's never too late to follow a dream. You have a dream, and I think if you talk about talk about these dreams with friends, they're often discouraging. They'll say, oh, well, you can't do that. She was very stoic, and she just followed her path of what she wanted to do, and was never discouraged, never let anybody discourage her, but she didn't talk a lot about what she was going to do either.
Right. Well, and for someone to be in that frame of mind back then, to me, is incredible. I mean, like today, my whole brand is age is irrelevant. And, I'm a huge proponent of women in their 50s and 60s and beyond, not just hanging up the coat and saying, okay, everything's done. That, there's a second chapter and a third chapter and a fourth chapter, and you can continue on, and you should, pursue your dreams and your goals and your passions, and you shouldn't let your age get in the way of any of that. So
Right.
for you and your mom back then, where basically, especially surfing was very much so a male dominated sport.
Right. There weren't many women surfing, and this made it even more fun because I met a lot of, I mean, we're just out there with men. So that was great,
And how did they, but so when you have competitions like that, and then, your mom is like the only, one in the contest, or even you, and then you win or you place well, was there a lot of resentment? Was there a lot of animosity, or was everybody like, acceptable
I
of?
just remember at school, I won that in my junior year. And, there were a lot of newspaper articles about me, and I had a lot of attention because of that. Maybe the girls, I never really did get along with the girls too well. And that was why I started surfing, because when I was in California, I was in the 9th grade when we moved to Hawaii, and I entered Punahou, which is the first private school west of the Rockies. I had to go back to the 8th grade.
Oh,
And
wow.
here I am. I've been with, high school, and I always thought I was older than what I was anyway. And then to have to go back with these babies and these catty girls. And so then I started going over to the high school and meeting some of the boys, the football players, and that made me even less popular. So that was one of the reasons I started surfing. I just went, I can't deal with any of this. And so every day, just before the bell rang, I was on the bus back to Waikiki and down to the beach after I put on my bathing suit and surfing till dark.
Right.
We had a lot of homework, so that was hard, but yeah. And then, so it was all good. And a lot of people ask, well, did you have any resentment from the men? No, the men were all our friends because there were waves for everybody. It wasn't like today where there's too many people and not enough, there aren't enough waves for everybody in many places. So a lot of places have gotten very territorial. But no, the Hawaiians, the locals, everybody was our friend. And, the ones that are alive are still friends today.
Right. So, you were obviously very adventurous back then. And so I'm guessing, just looking at you and, hearing, your story even today, I'm considering that you're still very adventurous.
I am. And I'm on a whole new adventure.
Yeah, for sure. When you were surfing, were you ever afraid of sharks or anything along that line, or did that not even?
I thought about that because one of our classmates, he was president of the junior sophomore class, was surfing out off the islands off Kailua and was bitten by a shark, and his young friends didn't put a tourniquet on, and he died. And he was the son, when Hawaii at that time only had a few restaurants. The restaurants were pretty much monopolized by Spence Cliff, and he was a Spence Cliff, just a darling boy. I didn't know him, but a really special young man, and he died. And I was affected by that, but I never, I didn't dwell on it. But they did have a big shark hunting expedition and all parts of the island, and they found the most sharks off Waikiki. But there was food for them. So that was really the only casualty during the 50s. There have been some up above Makaha, one or two in the last years. But no, we didn't scare us.
Well,
We just love surfing too much to let anything get in the way. Really.
What has the ocean taught you?
The ocean has taught me to what I said, to you have to respect the ocean, respect greater powers. If you're not careful, if you don't observe the situation, the environment, and act accordingly, if you just think you can bull over anything, it's taught me to be careful about that. I think it taught me to make quick decisions, because you have to choose your waves. You have to look out when you see a set coming. You've got to know to go to the right place. So maybe all of those things transfer to life, and claiming your space and your wave, and not letting anybody edge you out.
I love that. That's awesome. What are some of your
probably more if I gave it more thought.
What are some of your best and worst experiences surfing?
Well, I almost drowned at Makaha one time. That was a bad one. Buzzy Trent, who was one of the early big wave surfers, was a friend and a mentor, and taught me different techniques for surfing. And so one day, I think we cut out of school and went out to Makaha, and the waves were pretty bigger than I should have gone out in. And Buzzy was out there, and Peter Cole, who was another early big wave surfer. And so a big set was coming, and this is what can happen. It's, be one size at one time, and then 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour later, it's like added another 4 or 5 feet, getting bigger gradually. So this is what happened, and a big set was coming, and Buzzy was behind me, and he screamed at me to let my board go, because he was afraid that I couldn't handle the wave with the board, no leash. He let the board go, and I thought he knew best, so I let my board go. And then there was just all this whitewater, and after going under 2 or 3 of these waves, I couldn't get up to the top of the whitewater. You lose your strength, and you're putting your head up. And if it hadn't been for Peter Cole that saw me and came by and got me, I probably would have drowned. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I couldn't. I was losing ground with the waves. And then the other, and this one was probably even worse, as we'd gone to the North Shore, to Haleiwa, with a group, and that was when you could drive around Kaina Point. You can't drive around anymore. From Makaha's out past Makaha, is dead end. The road ends. You can't even ride a bike. You have to get down and scramble on the rocks. But we drove around, and we spent the night, and there were some California surfer friends, and one of them was a young man who'd come over from Coronado. And he was kind of smitten with my sister, who was 4 years younger, and he'd been camping on our property for a few weeks. And so we spent the night at Haleiwa. We all camped out, went out in the water the next day. And his name was Frank Brandley. He was the son of an admiral, and he didn't know to get out of the way of the 2 surfers that were coming in a critical place. And he got hit in the head and under the water. and just disappeared. And we didn't have any masks to fight. We just knew he was under the water. More sets were coming. So I paddled for shore to call the firemen, and to make a long story short, he ended up drowning. And that was horrible, because I think we'd even taken him out. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was really, really bad. But today I'm actually friends with his niece, and she teaches, she's a professor in San Diego, Dr. Edith Frampton, and we are in touch, we're friends. And she was very helpful during the writing of the book. When I need some help, I'd call her. She'd, oh yeah, Vicky. And when I did my book tour this summer in Southern California, I stayed with her, and she'll be coming over this summer. So we now have a friendship, so yeah, that was probably the worst. That changed my whole thought process about surfing. It really dampened my spirit.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And what about some of your best experiences?
Going to Lima, winning the contest, just surfing, at Makaha, camping out, surfing. Yeah.
And so today,
and with my mother, that was
well,
that was really special, because
right.
we all through high school, we really had common bonds, and she ended up being very close. We were sort of like sisters.
And did your other sister take up surfing too?
She didn't like being held under the water. She thought there were too many people surfing, and she would rather sit on the shore and read a book.
Oh.
We're very different.
Is she in Hawaii still?
She's in Hawaii. My mother built a house, and she's living in the house. And I built a little cottage out of Mother's garage. And now that's a rental. So, and when Mother passed, I told her, I said, we've had such wonderful times out here that when you're gone, I'm kind of done with this place. So I happened about that time to meet a high school classmate, and we met at our 40th high school reunion. And so I moved into Honolulu to be with him after Mother passed. I still go out there to deal with the rental, and but it's not the same.
Right. And what about like today? I mean, how often do you get to, do you still choose to spend time in the water today? Do you still enjoy the water?
I do. I'm hoping to go down and go for a swim after this. So I do water aerobics 3 mornings a week at our club pool, and then swim down at a place called Magic Island, which is right off of Ala Moana. And it's just a lovely little cove with very clear water, not too many people. And yeah, we had a really bad rainy period. So I've kind of haven't been for very much for a couple months, but I'm hoping to get back into it. I don't surf. By the time I got up, the wave would be gone. I did boogie board. I'm hoping to do some boogie boarding with a friend of mine, but
And what
I don't
about,
want to get hurt. I just want to keep the body in shape as much as I can.
Exactly. With your, being so strong with this kind of sport, you have to be strong, like we talked about earlier. What about, we talked about also too, back then, especially you in your 50s, and here I was in my 70s, in the 70s, as a female athlete, we didn't have access to everything that they have today, supplementation and nutritionists and dietitians and, homeopaths and, whatever. So looking back then as to how you trained, what you ate versus today, you look amazing. You're obviously very fit, probably still. And what's your training like today? I mean, don't even use. Might use that term loosely, training.
Very
But
loose.
you obviously want to exercise. But as far as eating, I mean, do you eat a pretty good, decent diet? I mean, do you still enjoy your sweets and a glass of wine, or how does that work for you?
I love gin and tonics. Well, what's interesting is mother, as part of her coursework in 1930, had a nutrition course. So growing up, she was no white bread, it was all whole wheat bread, no desserts, a very good diet. She knew a proper nutrition very early, and that's what we had, and that's what she practiced her whole life. And moderation. She drank, but in moderation. She loved to party as much as anybody else, but she knew her limits.
Right.
We love martinis, but gotta watch it. So, and I try not to eat too much sugar, too much bread, and a good diet.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. That's huge as far as like in the bodybuilding world too. I mean, your diet is 80% of how you look. And I think especially with a woman, especially over 50, and I'm an online fitness and nutrition coach. So if I have a new client come to me, I'll ask them, write down 3 days worth of food, write down everything that day you're eating. And, a lot of women, I mean, most of the women don't eat enough food, and they especially don't eat enough protein. And they'll eat a lot of processed food and a lot of carbs and stuff like that. And once we can retweak their diet, it's amazing the transformation that they see. Right. And how they even feel. They start
Right.
feeling better and more energy, and so that's always so rewarding for me to be able to help people like that too.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about it. I've got to get some protein powder. Our water aerobics coach is really into a proper diet. So she was just telling us that yesterday what she eats, and I thought, I got to get my act together a little better here.
Right. Is there anything, I mean, I know what the answer to this question is going to be, but I just want to ask you, any regrets? I mean, it sounds like you had like this amazing upbringing. You probably wouldn't change a thing.
No. Well, I married another classmate and have two daughters, two wonderful daughters. One was an amazing half miler. So my regret, I've been married a few times. I would be, that's a regret, but it's gotten me to where I am now, which, and it's been an adventurous path. I went back to college late. When my girls went to college, I went to college. So I believe in life learning. Mother believed in life learning. I think that's a really important thing to keep going on that. I was going to say something about all that. What was it? No, maybe just having made some better choices. Going to college earlier. I supported a couple of, I was a single mom for a few years, and I supported us on the sewing machine. That's how I got into the clothing business. And it was hard. It was really hard. It took a lot to keep everything together.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a firm believer.
So education is crucial, and the earlier the better.
Right. And you got it at you taught school too, right?
Right. And then so I went from the clothing business back to school to learn more about the clothing business, and decided it was too risky. So then I thought, well, I'll teach. So then I got an apparel manufacturing, AA, and then I got a bachelor's in clothing design, and then I went up to Oregon State and got a a degree in clothing and textiles with a minor in adult ed, and I was going to flip that and go for a PhD, but I couldn't hack Oregon's weather, so I came back to Hawaii. I taught 1 year at UH, and that wasn't going anywhere without a PhD. So then I went back to school for 3 more years to fit into the Department of Education, so I would have tenure and be able to hold my position. So I actually, it was a lot of school there, a lot of work, and so I worked with a dead end special ed class. When I first went, I could have done a movie. It was so awful. And then I worked with the pregnant and parent girls, so I had to learn all about that. And then finally, when I retired, I went back into dyeing silk, scarves, sarongs, clothes. I went back to doing that. And then when I moved up here, Makaha was a great place to do it because of the weather, very sunny, hot, dry. This can be windy, rainy, a little harder. And plus that was when I started writing the book, which took about 5 years. And I'd like to add that I have a color version. Do you have one? It comes out backwards or reverse, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Around. But anyway, this is the color version. They both look the same on the outside. This is available in bookstores and on Amazon. And then I have another book. This is $29.95. Then I have another book on Amazon that looks exactly the same on the outside, but it's $19.95. And on the inside, it's black and white.
Okay.
And then I have an audio book.
Oh, I love that.
It's just coming out in February. And I'm hoping to go up and read it myself one of these days. I wanted to get it out, so I hired Tavia Gilbert to read it, but I want to go read it myself one of these. So it's my voice. And then I'm talking to producers about a film or a television series or a documentary. That's kind of my least favorite, is a documentary, but I want to get the story out because I think there's so much inspiration and lessons for everybody, for men and women.
I agree 1,000%. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because your story with your mom to me is so profound and so inspirational. So I think that's wonderful. And not only do you have this book, Wave Woman, The Life and Struggles of a Surfing Pioneer, what is your website?
wavewomanbook.com.
Okay. And are you on social media too?
I am. Instagram, Wave Woman Book.
Okay.
And Facebook. I don't operate on Facebook so well, but Instagram. I haven't made any posts for couple of months. I've since my husband passed away, I've gotten kind of buried in other projects that I had to finish up, and so I've got to get back into posting. But there are a lot of posts there. The book came out right when COVID hit, so
okay.
I had to cancel 3 book tours, but I'm hoping to go in April to Austin and then to New York the week of 15th to that whole week. I have a granddaughter graduating in Austin, spend the next week in New York, and then to Georgetown, where my grandson graduated a couple of years ago, but they're going to have the ceremony. And of course, I have eyes on Florida and New York and Northern California. And yeah.
Well, I will definitely have to keep track of your trails and your travels because hopefully, our paths will cross at some point.
Yeah, our paths have to cross. I can see that.
I was telling you earlier that I get, we have Honolulu layovers too. So that'd be kind of fun too,
yes.
if I get a layover. But Vicky, this has been amazing. I've just been fascinated. I would love to sit down with you with a bottle of wine and just listen. And just listen to your stories, on the beach, of course. And
yes, I'll take you to Magic Island.
So that would be amazing.
Or Makaha.
But once again, for my listeners, her book is out now. If you want inspiration, you have to buy this book, Wave Woman, The Life and Struggles of a Surfing Pioneer. And you can also go to her website and check her out on Instagram too. So,
And I welcome emails.
Okay. And what's your email address?
wavewomanbook@gmail.com.
Okay. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you, Helen,
me.
for letting me share my story, my mother's story.
I'm honored and I'm thrilled.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Look forward to meet you.
Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye. I sure hope you enjoyed this interview with Vicky. I was so drawn to her story because it reminded me of all of us being in our 50s and 60s and beyond, being rebels, going renegade, being pioneers in today's world, stepping outside of the box and trying something new, getting uncomfortable, testing our limits, testing our abilities, and succeeding. Vicky and her mom Betty both had this positive resilience and passion for life. They didn't care what others thought. There was no age or gender barriers that concerned them. They pursued their joy and did what made them happy. Betty fostered independent choices in her children. She practiced tough love and imparted values that mattered. Through disappointments and failures, they discovered the acceptance of change and looking within for strength. Now, the ocean and surfing taught Vicky a lot about life. Not only is surfing a physically demanding sport, but it's also mentally demanding. And probably the most profound statement I heard her say was that when you were in the water, you had to claim a wave. Just like in life, you have to claim your own path. As the wave approaches, you have to make quick decisions and be decisive, claiming your space. Just like in life, making decisive decisions and staying on course. Today, at 81 years old, Vicky sets the bar quite high in my opinion. She has this aura about her, a sparkle in her eye. Her smile is infectious, her body and mind so strong from all those years of mentally and physically strength training while in the water surfing. If this story does not inspire you and motivate you to follow your passions regardless of your age, I don't know what will. Now you can reach Vicky through her website at wavewomanbook.com. She's also on Instagram at wavewomanbook. You can email her at wavewomanbook@gmail.com. And you can go to Amazon and buy her book, Wave Woman, The Life and Struggles of a Surfing Pioneer. Until next time, never forget, age truly is irrelevant. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.